In the quiet, dust-choked town of Steadsville, where the sun painted the horizon with strokes of red and orange, the Henderson family farm was a patch of life amidst the withering crops. Pa Henderson, a man built from sweat and sun, tended the fields with the tenacity of a saint, his calloused hands guiding the plow through the unforgiving earth. His wife, Ma, bustled about the homestead, her apron fluttering like a flag of resilience in the relentless prairie wind. Their son, William, had grown tall and lean, his adolescent curiosity often outpacing his chores. The town's whispers grew louder with each passing week. The cornfields, once a bastion of life and sustenance, had become a canvas for the strange. The stalks grew tall, twisting and knotting in impossible patterns. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and a malevolence seemed to seep from the very soil. Pa noticed the first signs of trouble when his cows began to sicken, their eyes rolling back in their heads, their bones brittle as twigs. He'd prayed for rain, for deliverance from the drought that clutched the land like a greedy hand, but the heavens remained as silent as the grave. Ma tried to keep the house a bastion of warmth and light, but even her hearty stews and sweet cornbread couldn't mask the bitter taste of fear that now seasoned every meal. She caught William sneaking glances at the preacher, his eyes glazed over like he was under some kind of spell. The boy's restlessness grew, and with it, so did the darkness that lurked beyond their property lines. One night, the wind howled like a pack of starving wolves, and Pa's sleep was ripped apart by a nightmare more vivid than any he'd ever known. He saw the town folks, friends he'd known his whole life, transformed into those twisted shadows that danced in the fields. They beckoned to him, their voices a symphony of temptation, whispering of the end of hardship and the dawn of a new, easier life. With a start, he realized it wasn't just a dream. William's window was open, and a sliver of moonlight illuminated his empty bed. With a heavy heart and the weight of his shotgun, Pa stepped into the inky darkness outside. His boots crunched through the brittle soil as he followed the trail of his son's rebellion. The corn towered over him, its rustling a cacophony of secrets and lies. His gut churned with the sense that he was being watched, but he pushed on, driven by love and duty. As he approached the heart of the field, the whispers grew louder, taunting and seductive. The shadows grew denser, and the stench of decay stronger. Pa's hand tightened around the stock of his gun, the wood smooth and comforting against his palm. He knew what he'd find, but he had to save his boy, had to pull him back from the brink of whatever hell awaited. The clearing was a scene from a nightmare. William stood at the center, surrounded by the elongated shapes that were once his friends and neighbors. Their eyes, now black as the void between stars, gleamed with an unholy light. The preacher, his grin a chilling rictus, held a book that wasn't quite a Bible, its pages fluttering like the wings of a giant insect. The boy looked up, and when he saw his father, there was no recognition, only the cold gleam of betrayal. "William," Pa called, his voice a tremor in the stillness. "Son, come home. This ain't right. This ain't us." But the boy just smirked, his skin paler than the moon above. "You're the one that's wrong, Pa. Can't you feel it? The change? It's like a promise, and all we gotta do is take it." Pa's eyes searched the distorted faces in the crowd, desperation clawing at him like the thorns of 1,000 roses. The preacher's grin widened, and he leaned in close to William, whispering sweet nothings that curdled the air. The boy nodded, and Pa felt a part of his soul shrivel up and die. "William, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking like the dry earth beneath their feet. "Don't do this. It's a lie. You're better than this." But William was lost in the seduction of the shadows, his eyes glazed with a hunger that Pa didn't recognize. "You don't get it, Pa," he spat. "This is freedom. This is power. And you're just too scared to see it." Ma, who had followed her husband's desperate footsteps into the field, gasped as the ground trembled beneath them. The corn stalks shuddered, and a low, guttural growl resonated through the night. The air grew thick with a charge that stung their skin, and the shadows around them grew denser, coalescing into a writhing mass of malevolence. Pa knew he had to act, or they'd all be consumed by the darkness. With a roar of defiance, Pa raised his shotgun and fired into the heart of the shadowy throng. The blast echoed through the night, and the creatures recoiled, hissing and snarling. William stumbled backward, his eyes flickering with confusion and terror. The preacher's smile faltered, and for a brief moment, Pa thought he saw a flicker of fear in the man's eyes. Ma rushed to her son's side, clutching the wooden cross she'd brought from the abandoned church. Its edges were chipped, but the symbol remained steadfast, a beacon of hope in the sea of despair that had become their lives. She pressed it to William's chest, and the shadows retreated, shrieking. The ground beneath them trembled more violently now, as if the very earth itself was rejecting the unholy pact. The preacher, his confidence shaken, spat a string of curses at Pa, his eyes flickering with an unearthly rage. "You'll regret this," he snarled, his voice no longer smooth but gravelly and inhuman. "You've doomed us all." Ignoring the preacher's threats, Pa turned to the creature that had once been his son. "William," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you gotta come home with us. We'll fight this together." William looked at the cross, then back at Pa, his eyes flickering with doubt. The shadows around him swirled, reaching out like greedy tentacles, trying to pull him back into their embrace. But something was changing in the boy. The light from the cross grew brighter, and the shadows retreated further, hissing and writhing as if in pain. With a final, desperate effort, Pa and Ma grabbed their son and sprinted for the edge of the field. The ground heaved and buckled, the very earth seeming to fight against them as they stumbled through the writhing cornstalks. As they emerged from the maelstrom, the shadows coalesced into a monstrous form, towering over the family. It was a twisted amalgamation of man and beast King Daigen, with eyes like black pits and a mouth full of jagged teeth. The preacher cackled, his human guise slipping away to reveal the creature that had been lurking beneath. "You think you've won, old man," he bellowed. "You've only delayed the inevitable." The ground trembled more fiercely, and the cornstalks bent and cracked as the creature lurched towards them. Pa aimed the shotgun, but it was Ma who stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "In the name of the Lord, I command you to leave my son," she shouted, raising the cross high. The creature recoiled, its shriek piercing the night. The earth beneath them stilled, and for a moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing. Then, with a final, desperate surge, it lunged at the family. Pa fired, and the blast sent it reeling back into the field. The shadows retreated, but the preacher remained, his eyes alight with fury. "This isn't over," he hissed, his body contorting and shrinking until he was once again a man, though his eyes remained pools of inky darkness. The Hendersons stumbled back to their house, their hearts racing. William was weak, his eyes sunken and his skin the color of ash. They laid him in bed, the cross clutched tight in his hand, and Ma tended to his wounds with trembling hands. She whispered prayers under her breath, her voice a soft lullaby that seemed to soothe the very air around them. The following days were a blur of whispers and accusations. The townsfolk who had once been Pa's friends now avoided his gaze, their own eyes haunted by the shadows that lurked in their hearts. The preacher's influence spread like a cancer, and more people fell under his sway. The fields grew darker, the crops more withered. Steadsville was dying, and no one knew how to save it. Ma tended to William with a fierce love, her prayers never ceasing. His condition improved slowly, the color returning to his cheeks inch by inch, as if the light of her faith was pushing back the tide of darkness that had claimed him. Pa watched, his heart heavy with regret and fear for his boy. He knew that the battle was not over, that the creature in the field was biding its time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The townsfolk began to gather in hushed whispers, their conversations laden with accusations and fear. The preacher's words had sown seeds of doubt, and now they pointed fingers at the very people who had once been their pillars of strength. Pa felt the weight of their suspicion like a boulder on his chest, but he knew that he could not give in to despair. He had to protect his family, his town. Ma sat by William's bedside, her voice a steady stream of prayers that seemed to keep the shadows at bay. William's eyes grew clearer, and he began to speak of the nightmares that had plagued him since that fateful night. His voice was weak, but the conviction in his words was unmistakable. He had seen the truth of the darkness that sought to claim them all. As the weeks turned into months, the town of Steadsville continued its slow march toward ruin. The preacher's flock grew, and with it, the tide of despair that washed over the town. The once thriving farms now stood as monuments to lost hope, their fields choked with the blackened husks of what had once been a bountiful harvest. Pa knew that something had to be done, that he could not stand by and watch his community crumble before his very eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with a mournful crimson, Pa gathered the townsfolk who had not yet succumbed to the preacher's siren song. They met in the charred remains of the church, the air thick with the scent of ash and regret. With Ma and William by his side, Pa spoke of the darkness that had crept into their lives, and the price they had paid for their desperation. His voice was steady, a beacon in the tempest of fear that had engulfed them all. He told them of the ancient pact that had been made with the creature in the fields, how it had fed on their doubt and anger, grown stronger with every lost soul. The townsfolk listened, their faces a mosaic of shock and guilt. They had been blinded by the promise of an easy life, by the allure of something other than the backbreaking toil of the land. But now they saw the truth, the cost of their greed was too high. Ma spoke next, her voice gentle but firm. We've strayed from the path of light, but it's never too late to find our way back. We must stand together, hold fast to our faith and our love for one another. Only then can we drive out this evil. William, though weak, nodded in agreement, clutching the cross that had become his talisman. The townsfolk murmured among themselves, some weeping, others vowing vengeance. Pa knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. They needed action, a show of unity and strength. He proposed a plan to confront the creature together, armed with the power of their collective beliefs. The air in the room grew electric with determination. Ma's garden had always been her sanctuary, but now it was a battleground. She tended to it with new vigor, planting roses that grew thick and strong, a symbol of their resilience. Each thorn was a reminder of the pain they had suffered, and each petal a declaration of their love for the town they called home. As the months dragged on, the townsfolk who had chosen to stand with the Hendersons grew stronger in their resolve. They worked tirelessly to repair the damage done to their homes and fields, and their faith in one another grew as steadfast as the crops that slowly began to recover. The preacher's power waned, his sermons now falling on fewer and fewer ears. His eyes grew wild with desperation as he watched his influence slip away like grains of sand through his fingers. The day of reckoning approached, heralded by a storm that rolled in from the west, its thunder a war cry in the sky. The townsfolk gathered in the church, now a fortress of hope rather than despair. They held their crosses high, their eyes gleaming with the light of their unshaken belief. Pa stood before them, the shotgun at his side a silent sentinel of his readiness to defend what was right. "We go tonight," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 prayers. "We reclaim what's ours." The townsfolk nodded in silent agreement, their faces a mix of fear and steely resolve. The storm raged outside, but inside the church, the air was still, charged with anticipation. They had prepared for this moment, each one of them drawing strength from the other's unshakable belief. The preacher's power had grown, but so had their determination to rid their land of the evil that had taken root. Ma had made her peace with the idea of fighting. She had seen the shadows in her son's eyes, felt the chill of the creature's breath in her own soul. Her garden had become a bastion of hope, a reminder that beauty could rise from the ashes. She had picked her roses carefully, the thorns now wrapped in cloth, ready to be used as weapons. The townsfolk, once divided by fear and doubt, now stood united in the face of the encroaching darkness. They had seen their friends and neighbors transformed into shambling shadows of their former selves. The preacher's promises had turned to ash in their mouths, and they had tasted the bitter dregs of regret. But now, they were ready to fight for Steadsville. As the storm raged, Pa Henderson led them through the streets, the rain stinging their faces like 1,000 needles. The cornfield loomed ahead, the blackened stalks reaching skyward like the fingers of the damned. The creature that had once whispered sweet nothings to them now roared with fury, feeling the approach of its adversaries. The townsfolk marched into the field, crosses raised, roses clutched, their voices a chorus of prayers that pierced the night. The creature, now a towering beast of shadow and malice, loomed over them, its eyes burning with an unquenchable hunger. The preacher, his human guise discarded, cackled madly, his body twisted and unnatural. Ma took a step forward, her eyes never leaving the creature's. She spoke a prayer, ancient and powerful, and the roses in her hand burst into flame. The townsfolk gasped, and the creature recoiled, its form flickering like candlelight in the wind. William, his strength returning, stepped up beside her, the cross in his hand now glowing with a blinding light. The beast roared, the sound shaking the earth beneath their feet. "This ends now," Pa bellowed, raising his shotgun and firing a blessed silver slug into the heart of the creature. The impact was explosive, sending a shockwave through the field. The preacher stumbled back, his form wavering like a mirage. The townsfolk surged forward, their faith a weapon more potent than any blade or bullet. The creature howled, its shadowy tendrils reaching out to smother the light, but the crosses held firm. Each thorny rose thrown into the fray became a fiery dart, piercing the darkness and leaving a trail of golden embers in its wake. The air was filled with the smell of brimstone and the sweet scent of roses burning. The battle was fierce, the storm above mirroring the chaos below. Ma's voice grew stronger, her prayer now a war cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The creature reeled, its form flickering as if it were a candle flame about to be snuffed out. William, his grip tight on the cross, felt a surge of power course through him, and he knew that this was the moment they had been fighting for. The townsfolk pushed forward, their voices joining Ma's in a crescendo of faith. The beast roared in fury, its shadowy tendrils retreating as the light grew brighter. The rain fell in sheets around them, but it felt like a baptism, a cleansing of the evil that had clung to their town for so long. The preacher, his true form fully revealed as a twisted creature of darkness, stumbled and fell to his knees. With a snarl that seemed to rip the fabric of the night, the creature lashed out, its tentacles snatching at the townsfolk. But they were ready, armed with their makeshift weapons of faith and light. The roses, now aflame, pierced the beast's shadowy flesh, and it howled in agony. The townspeople didn't flinch, they had suffered enough. With each blow, with every drop of holy fire that met shadow, they felt a part of themselves being reclaimed. Ma's voice grew louder, the words of her ancient prayer resonating through the tumult. The ground beneath their feet began to crack and tremble, as if the very earth itself was joining their fight. The creature staggered, its form flickering and weakening. And then, with a final, guttural cry, it was gone, dissipating into the storm like smoke on the wind. The preacher lay on the ground, his human guise shattered, a whimpering wreck of what he once was. The townsfolk, their eyes wide with a mix of terror and triumph, approached him cautiously. Pa stepped forward, the barrel of his shotgun aimed at the creature's head. "Beg for mercy," he growled. "You won't find it here." But the creature was gone, its hold on the town broken. The air grew still, the storm above dissipating as quickly as the shadows had retreated. The townsfolk looked around, the light from their crosses and roses casting a soft glow over the blackened field. The once towering beast was no more than a charred husk, the smell of burnt earth and sulfur lingering in the damp air. The preacher, or what remained of him, cowered before them, his form writhing and convulsing. His eyes, once black pools of malice, had turned a dull, lifeless white. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a wet gurgle escaped his throat. William, his grip on the cross unyielding, stepped closer, his eyes filled with a determination that had not been there before. "Get out," he ordered, his voice stronger than Pa had heard in months. "Leave this place and never come back." The creature that had once been the preacher let out a pitiful mewl, its body shriveling and contorting until it was nothing but a writhing mass of shadow on the ground. The townspeople watched in silent awe as the last remnants of the darkness dissipated into the damp soil, leaving behind only a faint scent of decay. Ma knelt beside her son, her eyes wet with relief and pride. "You did it, William," she murmured, her voice shaking with emotion. William nodded, his grip on the cross tight, his eyes never leaving the spot where the creature had been. He knew that the battle was not fully won, but the first victory had been claimed. The townsfolk looked around at each other, the reality of what they had just witnessed sinking in. They had faced the embodiment of their fears and doubt, and they had not only survived but had driven it back. The air in the field was thick with the smell of rain-soaked earth and the lingering scent of burnt shadow, but amidst it all, there was a sense of rebirth, a spark of hope that had been missing for so long.